Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we have two products from JJPRO, JJRC products. We have the T1 and we have the T2. And these are two new micro brush micros featuring 8.5mm motors. They have the new SciSky board inside there. It's NAS32 based. And you can see that's all wired up in there. So these are DSM2, DSM-X compatible. And on that note, I could not get this one, for whatever reason, to bind to DSM-X, so I had to go DSM2, and this one bound up just fine with DSM-X. You can see that JJRC decided to, and it's a nice thing, put some color grommets on the front, some white color, and we still have the standard in the back. And you can see I've already added my typical lobe protector to the top. And let's take a look at that real quick. Now you can see on these that I've used zip ties to protect the lobes of the antenna. And I have never really shown how to do that, and it's not complicated. I suspect most people could just figure it out. But really all I do is I take an 8-inch long zip tie, we run it through, zip it all the way down, snip it off back here, snip it off at the base, throw that little bit away, bring one of these in here because these are both centered. I'll just do one and I'll go to the meat here. So I just take a little bit of a dry fit. I'm just going to go slightly above the antenna lobes. Not much, just a little bit. And then I'm going to take some of my favorite glue. I use Gorilla Glue. It has some features where it expands. We put some right in there to keep this from sliding up and down. And we just kind of smear a little on the bottom, and then we stick it, hold it on there. I can get some to come out. There we go. Didn't take much. And I'm going to gently rotate these lobes so I can come right up through there. And I'm going to turn it sideways so it's as aerodynamic as possible. And we just hold this on there until it dries. Oops, let me scoot this up into shot. So I'm just going to hold this on there for a few seconds until it dries. These come with the micro low-Z connector, as you can see here, and they also come with batteries. And I've added Duralock to the back of my batteries and to the back of the quads. And the T1 came with 2 batteries and the T2 came with 1 battery. So that's either normal, or somebody forgot to pack an extra battery, or somebody packed an extra battery. Who knows? They're 600 milliamp, 20C batteries. They do just fine. You see these with a lot of these brush micros. And in the box also comes a little goodie packet, which features an extra set of props. We have a USB charger. You can see it there. We have a prop protector over the top of that. And that's a really nice feature because getting these props on and off, that can be a little bit of a tedious thing. You want to be careful not to bend your motor stems, and these do just fine. I actually got one of these more than a year ago and have been keeping close track of it to remove my props on my micros. We have an extra set of coordinated grommets there and some Velcro that we can use on our base to keep the battery attached. And you can probably see right there we also get a couple of extra sets of rubber bands. This frame has 2 notches in the top that then the rubber band loops around to keep your battery on the bottom. And this one has notches on both sides of the base here. And I find this one to be a little bit more fussy to get the battery on and off. So that's one minor point against that. And we've seen this one before in the QX80. And the motor cages, these are kind of different as far as how they cut the frame, but the motor cages are very, very similar. Oh, got some more batteries done. And you can see that the size is just slightly different as well, but the props are just colored different. I think they're pretty much identical. But this model requires you to solder on your own ESC, and it also uses a slightly different camera. You can see that this camera is likely the EF01. It has the ears and the longer nose. This camera was also used in the JJRC P130 Battler that I had a few videos ago, and if you want to see that, I will put the fixed version of the video up here in a card. And the reason why I put the fixed one is because the P130 out of the box didn't fly very well. So this one features kind of a double arm to where you have thrust or air that can get down between them, and that's a good thing. But one thing that you should note about these is that with this sort of frame, the weak point is always going to be where the carbon fiber goes around the motor, and that has the possibility of breaking, like this LT105. I caught a branch, fell in some grass, and it snapped that motor right off. So it's something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and weigh these up. Bring in the trusty scale. All right. So we'll go with the T2 first. 46.4 grams. Do I have that battery lead? Let me check that again. I might not have had that battery lead on the scale. 46.4. Okay, same. And 42.7. So the T1 is lighter, so therefore in theory we should get more thrust out of the T1, but it will be pretty minor. If you're looking to get into FPV flying, I think these are really good options. They're low cost, they're pretty robust, you can fly them inside and outside, and so if you're just getting started, I would highly encourage you to start with something like this or the QX80. If you have the energy and ability to do some small soldering there, you can get into something like this. This features an F3 board, which is actually my preference. I think these fly a little bit better just because the board, the processor on those are a little bit easier to tune. I should mention that you should save the box that these guys come in because they're actually kind of nice. Let me get that into shot here real quick. This one I've already modified, so it can fit right down inside. You get yourself a nice little case to carry your micro in. You don't have to go buy anything or create anything yourself. You just cut the slot out here. You've got space for your props and batteries and maybe other things. So, decent box. But let's take these outside and take a little comparison on how they fly. Okay, while today wasn't an ideal day to take a flight, these are two pretty true flights. I try to show the vehicles flying in motion and taking various turns. I'm not a big fan, or I don't believe that showing a device doing flips and rolls necessarily indicates whether it flies well or not, because if you can't go forward and you can't yaw and you can't get around objects, what good are flips and rolls? And quite frankly, I'm not very good at flips and rolls. But we take a little bounce off the leaves and we hop back up in the air and off we go. And they fly like you would expect a micro to fly. I think if you want to hop these things up, they will accept some various motors that are out on the market. You can investigate the Spintex. Micro Motor Warehouse has some motors of various kinds that you can actually check out and maybe get some more punch out of the motors, or lift or forward flight, whatever you're looking for. No near miss there with the tree. Whoa. But you can also do some other things to help increase the flight characteristics of really all micros. You can change out the lead for some thicker gauge wire. You can also change out the connector for the battery from the microlosi to something like the JST. Myself, I prefer the JST connectors. In theory, they can deliver more juice to the board and thus the motors, so we should be able to hit the throttle and get more punch. You can also get some different batteries. These batteries that come with quads generally are pretty low C, and while they fly fine and they're great for getting us started, if you really want to start pushing your flight skills or your flight performance, I always recommend the 480 milliamp battery from Micro Motor Warehouse. I believe it's actually made by MyLipo, but I think Benedict set up some sort of distribution exclusivity with them on that particular battery. And you can check out mylipo.com and .de for other sizes of batteries as well. I tend to fly a few of their different batteries. You pay a premium sometimes for them, but I think their performance is really, really good. I've tried a lot of different batteries in 1S and 3S, and I'm starting to explore the 2S side of things for some projects I've got coming up. And my LiPo batteries are pretty good. But the 480 you have to buy from Micro Motor Warehouse. You can also do something like install some Walkera Ladybird props, and those are widely considered to be a little bit better props. These props look very, very similar to that, so I don't know if they're clones or if they're possibly Ladybird props. But this is the T1, and it flies pretty good. I think the limit is that you can't get much camera angle. So at least for me, that makes fast forward flight a little bit more difficult. Oh, and I clipped the swing. Great. Well, on to the T2. You can see the T1 there in the shot. And you can see right away, because I was able to create some camera angle, that I'm flying a lot faster forward. And that just, that's natural. You angle your camera back and your eyes are going to indicate level, and you're going to hit the throttle and the pitch in order to create level with your eyes. And look who we have here. Somebody left something on the swings. I don't know if that's Ken or that might be the guy from Frozen. Oh, Olaf? Is that his name? Anyways, I happened to notice that guy, so we wanted to take a closer look. And why I got the goggles on, why walk over there to see who it is? I'll just use the goggles in the vehicle here. I think the tune on this one is a little bit better, and I'm not completely satisfied with it, but it's pretty good. And when we get done, we'll go back and we'll run through clean flight. I'm running 3.0.1 on this, and not clean flight. We're running beta flight 3.0.1 on this, and we'll go through the setup process. So if you need to flash your board or reset up your board, you'll have a pretty good idea, because it is a bit different. Oh no, a crash. Well, we'll reset and we'll go again. And in the clean flight, it's a little bit different than the original SciSky boards. I've used several of those in my early on builds. If you dig back in my channel, you'll see some Picnic Quad frames. I originally had a Quantum Wisp frame that I kind of fell out of love with. And I fell out of love with that one because of grommets. But the frame design was a bit different than what we're seeing now. They actually had open-ended cups for the grommets, and now they're fully encompassed carbon fiber frames that you push the grommets through. And I think they do quite a bit better. And you can also see we've got a bit of a wobble there from time to time in forward flight. And I think that's from the breeze. And you can see in several of these shots in both flight videos that the leaves are falling, and we've got a fairly good breeze. And this time of year, with the leaves coming off the trees, more of that breeze is making it through into the yard. A couple of times, if I recall correctly, a couple times during this flight, my throttle thumb came off the sticks. I'm actually a pincher, but the way I pinch is kind of with the thumb on top, and when that slips off, I kind of lose a bit of control. Not total control, but a bit. At the end of the flight footage, I'll also put together a close proximity package where I play around the swing set and kind of shoot some gaps. But I crashed so much, I don't think that's a good representation of what these crafts fly like. So I'll just tag that on at the end, and it's a little bit of a additional fun footage. Whoop, almost hit the climbing wall there as I'm investigating Olaf or Ken or whoever that is. But I really enjoy micros. I think micros are a great way to getting in this hobby. I think they allow you to fly in spaces that are much smaller, and you're less likely to draw attention, especially negative attention. If someone sees you flying and they think, oh, who's the weirdo with the goggles over there, and you bring it in and show it to them, they'll most likely just think it's a toy. They may still think you're a weirdo, but they'll think it's a toy, and they won't be so fearful of it like we sometimes see in the news about drones and dangerous drones and needing regulation. But you can see a little bit more of that wobble there. And it's not consistent, so I have to assume that it's some outside force. So I might need a little bit more eye or something like that. And when we go through the beta flight configuration, you'll be able to see that. And you'll also get some possibly starting PIDs if you're interested in that. I know I've gotten some requests for starting PIDs. Your mileage may vary. You might not like it. I kind of like my sticks to be very sensitive. I don't add any deadband or anything, so it'll get you started if you're new and it's your first vehicle. But if you're an experienced flyer, you might not like it. But you get to see it, and I get to fill a request from the comments on other. Well, bringing in for a landing after about 4.5 minutes, and back to the desk. Okay, let's take a look at our beta flight configuration here. So we've got this is the T2 that's connected here. Everything's working fine there. We don't have a lot to look at here. We've got the serial R exits on. If you're running beta flight, they have this nice little feature for your ESC where you can just select brushed, and then you won't have to worry about setting the motor PWM rate. In clean flight, you have to type in the CLI, set motor underscore PWM underscore rate equals 32,000, and then hit enter, and then type save and hit enter again. In beta flight, you just select brushed. So I've got motor stop,
You can see where I've got my values set there. This will cooperate and scroll down for me here a little bit. Maximum in throttle. And this is what's different. The older SciSky boards, you would select serial RX if I recall correctly. Now they're using RX ppm. And then you can see I've also got Spectrum 2048, which means it's running DSMX. Scroll down there a little bit further. I did not change the gyro or loop times, left those at stock settings. And here's a look at the PIDs. You can see my RC rates are quite high and the super rates are quite high. You may not want to use super rates. That's kind of a major change, going from clean flight to beta flight, outside of just how it controls the copter. And these values, it's not the highest I've ever seen on a brush copter, but they're relatively high, especially compared to their brushless counterparts. You can see I've got TPA, that's the defaults, and the TPA breakpoint, that's a default as well. I don't have my receiver hooked up right now, but the channel map for my particular radio is there. Oftentimes with the older SciSky boards, or if you're doing a Lemon RX satellite or other Lemon DSM2 or X, you would have to change that to the Spectrum down there, but we don't have to for this one. We do have a couple of channels we need to reverse, and we'll take a look at that back at the desk with the radio. And then you can see how I've set up my modes. So I use one switch for arming, and I use a 3-position switch for whether I want to just have it in rate mode, which is with nothing selected, which the value would be up here, and I switch it to the middle position. That brings on air mode, and then horizon mode, which generally I don't use anymore, but you may want to have your mode set up similarly or a bit different. And we've got nothing else selected there. And if we go to the CLI and we type, oh, I can't spell, version, we can see that we're running 3.0.1. That's a pretty recent version. Let's disconnect and we'll take a look at the PIDs on the T1. I didn't have any troubles flashing this board, and we could take a quick look at that before we jump into the PIDs. And these are basically the settings I used, and I just used it straight out of beta flight. I selected nays, and then you go into the firmware version, which in this course is the most release that is stable. I did full chip erase, no reboot sequence, none of that other stuff selected. You load it online, and then you can scroll down the bottom and click flash firmware, and it worked for me. I did it several times to both these copters, so no issues there. Let's jump in and we'll go right to the PIDs. Again, this is the T1, and the values are similarly high, especially my rates. And that should give you a starting point. It may not be perfect for you, but it'll give you a little bit of an idea. Modes are set up identical. And just to be thorough, you can see it's running the same version. And again, we have in our ports serial RX, and in our configuration we've got brushed again, motor stop. 1050 is what I set the minimum throttle value. If you're running air mode, you want to move that up or down. Depends on how the copter feels when you're flying kind of free fall or where you're doing acrobatics. And we've got the RX ppm, and then we've got the Spectrum 1024, which is DSM2. Okay, well, let's head back to the desk.
A few final things to tidy up here. As you can see with this particular copter, I took a rubber band and just looped it around the back and then over this end to give me a little camera tilt. You can get a little bit of a shot of, that might be 10 or 12 degrees, maybe 15. And I had a really difficult time pulling these, getting the battery secured and then getting the rubber band looped back around. And I thought about using just loom bands, which are a little bit shorter rubber bands, and just using 2. I ended up, because I'm using this Duralock, the Duralock does a good job of keeping it on, and if the battery becomes dislodged in flight or on a crash, it's not such a big deal. So I just went ahead and put that rubber band down through the middle. That's how I do it a lot on micros, is just have a rubber band down the middle. This one I really didn't modify too much, but again, I think I said this in the first segment. In order to get any camera angle at all, we're going to have to move the camera forward, and I don't think we can do that, just because if you can see, let me get a pointer, this camera housing is wider than the gap between these two posts. So if you want to get camera angle on this one, I think what we're going to have to do is remove these front posts, actually probably remove the whole top plate, which wouldn't be such a terrible thing. If you wanted to do something like this, you'd have to change it. You might do two, maybe just off the side plates here on the bottom. But if you remove the top plate, then you can get some camera angle back as well, and you can resecure it with some foam tape or rubber bands or what have you. But with this top plate mounted the way it is and this camera the size it is, we just can't get any camera angle on this one. And I also mentioned during the flight video that there are some upgraded batteries you can get. This is the 480 that I was talking about. It's kind of nondescript, and I've got my Duralock right over the top of the print. But you'll notice one thing about this is it's running a higher gauge wire. It's actually a lower number, but a thicker wire. And that, if you can read that, is 18 gauge wire. And it runs on a JST. And you can see that these wires, that's a pretty good fit. When I say good, I mean snug, and you're not going to get much bigger in there if you can at all. I have a crimper, and I bought some JST connectors off of eBay. So traditionally what I do is I make my own JST connector to use on micros, and I match the wire size, which we also are able to get a longer connection, so we have the possibility that in theory we can get more power to our motors. This is another battery option, the Voltamat 555. This one you get directly from MyLipo, and it's also another really good battery. I really don't know of any 1S batteries that are better. I have not tried the graphenes that are out there. I've been happy with these, and you can actually tell a difference when you fly with these versus other single cells, because when you take off, it jumps up in the air, and you get 4 to 8 feet before you really it kind of dawns on you. It's like, whoa, I got a lot more power here. So if you want to look to hop these up, something that's relatively simple to do is you can make your own JST lead if you have a crimper and a kit, or you can buy those things, or you can buy a JST, or you can also get these and then convert them over to micro-LOSI if you want to do that, or buy a little adapter if you want there. And as you can see with my little zip tie protectors, that my lobes are doing quite well, and these guys have been through a lot of crashes as I went through many flights and tuning sessions, and that does the trick for me, both indoors and outdoors. I didn't fly these indoors. It's something you can definitely do. I think they're more suited for indoor flight in larger spaces than your home. You can definitely fly them around your home. It's a little bit more challenging, but that can be done. I just didn't do it in this case. I've also noticed that this frame on crashes, this center plate becomes dislodged, so you might want to check that. And also when you get them, make sure that your screws on these posts are tight down, because I noticed, I think it was this one, that most of the screws were just loose and it was really wobbly, so you want to tighten those down to make sure that everything is okay there. When you're binding, it can really be a challenge sometimes with these, especially if you haven't been through the frustration of your first one. I've got my Devo 10 out here that barely fits in the screen, but I have experienced and or read about people that have to, and it'll vary by radio, if you're using a Devo 10 or if you're using a Devo 7 with deviation firmware on it, or if you're using a straight spectrum radio, you may have to bring the antenna from the SciSky board really close, or you may have to get it a meter away. I've seen videos where people couldn't get things to bind up until they moved it further away. As long as you have a configuration set and your Betaflight or CleanFlight set properly, just play with the binding procedure. And it flashes real rapidly when it's in the binding mode. So when you first plug the battery in, if you get it the very first time, it won't flash immediately really fast. You have to wait about 10 seconds, and then it'll start to flash really fast, and then the board's ready for binding. And it will go out for a few seconds, and then it'll come back on. And when it comes back on solid, you know you're bound and set to go. Okay, if you have any other questions or comments, please leave those in the section down below. And here comes that close proximity flying I promised. Thanks for watching.